Hello everyone and welcome to this special live show presentation of Women of Grace. I'm Johnette Benkovic. On January 20th of this year, Secretary of Health and Human Services Kathleen Sebelius reaffirmed a rule that virtually all private health care plans, including those of religious employers, must provide sterilization, abortifacients, and contraception. In response to the outcry from religious leaders, the religious faithful, and citizens in general, the administration scrambled back and made an accommodation so narrow that it is no accommodation at all. Since then, lawsuits have been filed against the federal government by major Catholic organizations, as well as a number of state attorney generals. Included among those who have filed lawsuits is the Eternal Word Television Network, the largest Catholic media network in the world. Join us today as Michael Warsaw, President and CEO of EWTN, Mary Jo Anderson, and Father Edmund Sylvia discuss the mandate and what it means for all of us.
We are women of grace round the throne of the Lord Most High. And we lift up our praise from the depths of our souls. Hear our cry. Oh, Lamb of God, it is our one desire to seek your holy face, women of
The stunning news that the Department of Health and Human Services was upholding an earlier ruling mandating that private organizations, including religious entities, must provide insurance coverage for abortion, contraception, and sterilization rocked the church, people of faith, and citizens at large. This overstepping by the federal government into the life of the church is unprecedented in our nation's history, portending a bleak outlook for the First Amendment right of religious freedom. Here to discuss this issue with us are our guests today. Let's welcome President and CEO of the Eternal Word Television Network, Michael Warsaw, Catholic commentator and journalist, Mary Jo Anderson, and our own Father Edmund Sylvia, Holy Cross Father, theological advisor, and chaplain to Women of Grace. Welcome, welcome to Women of Grace today.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about a very serious issue. I know that the people that I speak with are absolutely stunned by this, and we're all trying to make provision. But I think it's important for us to go back and to take a look at the genesis of this and how all of this began to be pressed upon us from the administration and from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So, Mary Jo, let me just ask you, could you share with us just a wee bit about the background of this whole issue?
Janet, I think it's particularly significant that during the election in 2008, the concerns about how health care, which is very dear to the social mission of the church, would be handled. We've always been an advocate for care for the least of our brothers. So many people were persuaded that this would be a good vehicle as long as the First Amendment rights, the rights of religious liberty and conscience, would be sequestered, so that this would not in any way come under a secularized version of health care. And our bishops were given those assurances. Unfortunately, there was a communication gap, or perhaps even an ideological gap. And for our purposes, for Catholic purposes, the assumption was that as long as the church, as in a building church or a specific ministry, were giving some sort of accommodation, that all would be well. The difficulty, of course, is that institutions like EWTN or Catholic Charities, your ministry, any Catholic individual employer would also be held bound by the mandate. So it's not just for the church building or the people that are identified specifically as doing church work, but for the entirety. And then also for our Protestant brothers and sisters, indeed anyone of faith, who would find this mandate objectionable to their conscience and their practice of religious liberty.
Yeah. You know, Michael, I'm thinking about how the news must have rocked all of you here at EWTN. What was the initial response among those executives and your board of directors?
Sure. Well, you know, clearly, I think all of us saw this coming. We've seen over the last nearly 4 years now that this is an administration that is very openly hostile to people of faith and to religious expression. And so in some respects, it didn't come as a surprise. But of course, you're always shocked when you actually see in black and white, what these regulations are and what this really means. So we began really carefully studying the issue in the fall. In the fall of 2011, I started conversations with the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty that's representing EWTN in its current suit against the administration. And we really looked at where this was going and where this was heading. We still had hope, though, through the fall of last year, that in the final rules as proposed, the Secretary and the administration would ultimately back away from their rhetoric and would ultimately propose a rule that respected the conscience rights of individuals and entities that objected to many of the procedures that were included in this. And sadly, as we know, obviously that was not the case when the Secretary announced those proposed final rules on January 20th. And so at that point, we really felt that the best course of action, the best approach to addressing this for EWTN as an entity, but also on behalf of the larger community of believers, was for us to turn to the courts and ask the courts to examine this. I think one of the things that concerns us, and I've spoken a lot about this over the last several weeks since this has come out, is, this isn't about contraception. This is fundamentally a First Amendment discussion. This is about rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religious expression. They're guaranteed to us under the Constitution of the United States. That's what's at stake here. And in the lawsuit that EWTN filed, that's really what we're asking the courts to look at and say, the administration has overreached, the administration has violated our constitutionally protected rights.
Mm-hmm. Father Ed, I know that your background is that of a history scholar, mm-hmm. and we think about the balance of power that we have with regard to the branches of government within our federal government here. And we do also look at the constitutional rights and provisions that are ours as a people under this nation. And it is true that the government exists to serve the people, right, not the other way around. And as we look at those realities and we begin to see this, as I said in my open, this is something that's relatively unprecedented, to have this kind of an intrusion into the hearts and minds of individuals of religious faith, as well as this area having to do with conscience, the inability to really follow your conscience in doing what you know is morally right for you according to the law of God and the teachings of the church of which you are a member, I think is very stunning.
Sure it is. But as Michael said, not something that really catches us totally by surprise, because we've seen this secularizing of our culture coming at us now for decades. I couldn't help, and I even brought with me Archbishop Chaput's book, Render Unto Caesar, because written back before the last election, yes, he was prophetic in understanding and rooting this in, again, a Catholic American understanding of who we as Catholics living in the United States of America, historically, rooted in the Constitution, etc., what that is really all about. And if we don't have that whole perspective, like you said, a government which from the very beginning was set up with a balance of powers so that no one branch would overstep these rights, etc., if we don't truly appreciate all of that, then we find ourselves not really knowing where to turn. And as Michael said, in EWTN's case, we've turned now toward the judiciary as an assistance. But there are other things happening now in the legislative branches. Many, including Cardinal Dolan, just yesterday said, as far as our interaction with the executive branch on this issue, that door seems closed. We're not going to get any help there.
Right, and I think that's been one of the things that's been difficult throughout, certainly for EWTN, and in my conversations with bishops and others in the church who are addressing this issue, is while the administration has been saying for many, many months in one-on-one conversations between the president and Cardinal Dolan that it was open to dialogue and so forth, 2 days after the supposed accommodation was announced, the White House Chief of Staff essentially said, this matter is closed, this discussion is over, there's no further conversation. Yet Secretary Sebelius, still, even as of earlier in this week in testimony before the U.S. House, made reference to entities like EWTN who are self-insured and said, well, we're still working on this. We're going to provide some sort of accommodation for these self-insured entities who also qualify for the religious exemption. Well, it's completely contradictory, because if you qualify for the religious exemption, you're exempt from the rule. You don't need anything further, whether you're self-insured or not. But that still leaves EWTN and thousands of other religious and faith-based organizations who self-insure our health plans, in the position of having to pay for these procedures that are obviously immoral and objectionable to us. And that is unprecedented. And I think I was pleasantly surprised, actually. I was invited by the New York Times to write an op-ed piece for them a week ago, and which was amazing that the New York Times would consider publishing something from EWTN. But one of the points that I made in that piece was the administration wants to paint EWTN and those who oppose this mandate as coercing our employees on this and coercing the people that work for us to adopt our way of thinking. The reality is the reverse is true, and that's the argument I made in that piece, is that this is an unprecedented coercion by the government. What the government has done is come in and say to us as an employer and others, no, you're going to follow our rules, and if you don't, we're going to fine you $2,000 per employee, which in EWTN's case in the first year would be $600,000 in fines. The Congressional Budget Office, on behalf of the Congress, recently did another study that indicated there is the potential for fines of $100 a day per employee. This could be millions of dollars in fines for an organization like EWTN. So the message here is very, very clear from the administration on this issue. Either you agree with us and you go along with this, you put your conscience issues and your principles in the drawer and you do what we say, or we put you out of business.
Mm-hmm. Is coercion too big of a word to use here, Mary Jo?
Gestapo sounds good to me, because eventually that is what it's the force of the government who has a monopoly on the power here, so that it's no longer we the people, but the state that now has taken the entire reins. As Father was elucidating earlier, we have the branches of government, and Michael also is saying now we've had to turn to the judiciary because the executive branch is now closed to us, and the legislative branch are sort of scurrying around like an anthill that's been kicked over, because just yesterday the rights of conscience bill was tabled by a vote of 51 to 48, with 13 Catholic senators voting to table it rather than to pass the bill from, I think it's Senator Blunt from Missouri, simply to say we are upholding the rights of conscience. And I think it's very important for our listeners to realize that the First Amendment right, it's the religious conscience clause that's first. The history, as Father Ed said, the history of this nation really begins with a desire for religious liberty. And when our founding fathers so wisely put the First Amendment and put religious freedom and liberty first, it's the first right. And for the government to come in, I know Gestapo is a very heavy term, but to completely begin at the first of the First Amendment, the first right in the First Amendment, is just unprecedented muscle and power of the state against we the people.
Father Ed.
Janet, just this morning I went back to a file that I've saved for a couple of years now, but in 2009, people like now Cardinal Dolan, together with Chuck Colson and a whole lot of other people, wrote something called the Manhattan Declaration. And I encourage people to go to the manhattandeclaration.org and read that document. But it talked about these challenges to such things as the sanctity of life, the preservation of marriage, as well as religious liberty. They saw, and it covered, remember, people who signed this document cover the broadest of spectrums. They all recognized the handwriting on the wall, you know, that this radical agenda being forwarded by this administration, such that, you know, Cardinal Dolan has had to kind of say, well, I was told this personally by the president, and then 2 days later something else comes forward, you know, that even in his charity, he's in a position of having to say, I can no longer believe him when he tells me something.
It's a true betrayal.
It is a betrayal.
Well, and just yesterday I was reading a quote that someone had pulled from then law professor Barack Obama in Chicago, you know, making a very passionate point about the importance of faith in the public square and the importance of people's religious values shaping how they act in the public square. You know, this is obviously several years before he became president of the United States. Everything that he and his administration have done over the last 3.5 years of the administration, however, contradicts that. It's clear that this is an administration that collectively believes that there is no room for religious expression in the public square. That you know that interprets really that First Amendment principle as being about freedom of worship. Inside the doors of your church, you can do whatever you want, but don't bring your morality, don't bring your religion out into the public square and into this debate.
I'm glad that you made that distinction, Michael, because I think it's an important distinction to make. Because when that phraseology first hits the ear, we think it's one and the same thing, but it's not one and the same thing.
Not.
It doesn't permit you to do things publicly that you would normally do publicly. For example, when my family and I go out to dinner, we make the sign of the cross, regardless of the restaurant we're in, and we pray a blessing. And you know, that would be something that then would not be permitted because you're bringing your faith into the public square. The adornment, if you will, of religious jewelry would be something that employers could prohibit. As a matter of fact, I know employers that are prohibiting that, even as we sit here and speak. And what we're talking about here, and I'm so glad that EWTN has taken the action that it's taken, because action has to be taken. We've been forced, I think, into a corner, and I couldn't agree more. I do think that there is an ideology that's at work here. I think there's an agenda that's at work here, and I think we are very, very foolish if we don't open our eyes and see it. Now, there might be people that are tuning in today for passing the channels, and they stop and they're hearing this discussion. They might say, well, this really doesn't affect me, you know, because I don't work in a religious institution. As a matter of fact, I don't even go to church. I mean, you know, I'm not even really sure that the God of the Christian exists. I'm agnostic, or I'm an atheist, or whatever I am. Here's the point. As you said, Mary Jo, this is the first right given to us, you know, underneath our Bill of Rights, underneath our Constitution. What comes next? Freedom of speech. And if one topples, they all topple. We don't realize, this is, in a certain sense, I think the administration sees this as the easiest one to topple first. I sound as though, you know, perhaps people say, oh my gosh, this woman's a conspiracy theorist. I think we're foolish if we don't see truth.
No, I think we have to be very much aware, and people, wherever they stand on these issues, have to be aware, you know, as has been said out there. This is not just a Catholic issue by any means. This is an issue for everyone.
For every citizen.
Every citizen of this country, whether you're a believer or not. Because this is a situation of the government stepping in and using its power to coerce individuals to do things that are diametrically opposed to the rights that are given to them under the Constitution. And that affects everyone, whether you're a person of faith or not, whether you're Catholic or not. You know, there was a great piece that was published in the midst of all of this this battle by Dr. Timothy George, who's the dean of the Sanford Divinity School here in Birmingham, Alabama, Baptist Seminary, and Chuck Colson, you know, and who said, we're all Catholic now, you know, and I've heard that line out there more and more because I think certainly people understand this is not just a Catholic issue. While it's, of course, being targeted and perhaps impacts, in terms of the contraceptive mandate, perhaps impacts Catholic institutions most directly, in principle, it's something that affects all of us as Americans.
Well, see, that's just it. It's being framed as a contraceptive issue, which is meant, I think, to rally the more social progressive wing of the country into saying, oh, this is nothing. It doesn't, as John had said, it doesn't really affect me. But as our Protestant brothers and sisters have seen, it not only affects all people of faith, but all Americans. Remember the old line, I disagree with what you've said, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. And we sort of need that same attitude here. I did want to just bring out one important point, I think, vis-a-vis the action that our bishops have taken. I'm not sure if many people realize that before Vatican II, we didn't have the bishops' conference, and each bishop sort of handled attacks on religious liberty in the history of the United States, diocese by diocese and issue by issue. After Vatican II, of course, we have the bishops' conference, and they can act as brothers in concert with one another. To this point, the bishops have always addressed it in the subject matter, i.e., if there was an assault on religious liberty that came on the matter of, say, with DOMA, and this administration, as you know, has refused to support and defend the law of the land, which is DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. The bishops would deal with religious liberty against marriage underneath the Committee on Marriage and Family. Or if it was an issue of pro-life, then they would deal with it in the pro-life committee. But this September, the bishops were so alarmed, as you say, you could see it coming, and you went to the Becket Fund sort of marshaling your forces. The bishops did the same, and they have now established their own ad hoc committee on religious liberty to deal only with religious liberty as a foundational right, not as part of another issue. So they too have sort of, you know, put themselves into a higher plane, a higher dimension to deal with this under Bishop Laurie of Bridgeport.
Friends, we do want to let you know that we are taking phone calls today, and in just a minute we're going to get those numbers up there for you. We certainly do want you to share in our discussion today right here on EWTN. You know, I was thinking to myself, and I want to mention this because this really irritates me. This gets under my skin horribly. What really irritates me about this is the fact that it's being framed as something that is all about women's health. So that's a sham. I mean, really, that's just a ploy. It's cloaking the real agenda, and the real agenda is let's eliminate religious liberty, at least as we've known it here in the United States of America. And I think that here's Johnette Bankevic's resolution to this issue, at least for the moment. My resolution is let women know about women's health. Tell them the truth about contraception. Get the word out there. You know, it paints the church as being this Goliath that is totally against little David there, the woman, who is only trying to do what she thinks is the right thing to do. Now, we know morally about the church teaching on contraception. We know the reality of that. But there's nothing healthy about this. There's nothing healthy about contraception. There's absolutely nothing healthy for a woman about abortion. There's nothing healthy about abortifacients. And I'd just like to throw a few facts out there. And ladies, I want you to listen up, because you have daughters, you have nieces, maybe even yourself, maybe you are contracepting. It is important for you to understand the truth of this. And I hope you get your backup. And I hope you start writing letters to the editor in your papers. And I hope you get all of your girlfriends to do the same thing. And I hope we stampede in such a way that we expose this lie, because it's a sham. It's a sham. Let me just read this to you. In 2005, the World Health Organization named the birth control pill. Are you hearing this? In 2005, the World Health Organization named the birth control pill as a Group 1 carcinogen alongside of radium, asbestos, and cigarettes. Did you know that? Did you know that the incident of breast cancer is tremendous? It's 30% increase in cancer risk among women who take the pill. Now, medical textbooks dismiss that fact. Ladies, 30%. Think about that. That's 3 women out of every 10 breast cancer because of the birth control pill. In, what year was it here? Let me just check my facts here. In 2002, they discovered that the hormone replacement therapy was causing breast cancer. There were 30 million women taking hormone replacement therapy at that time. 15 million stopped. Breast cancer reduced by 11%, the most invasive form of breast cancer. I don't know what more we need to realize that this is a sham, that this isn't about women's health, that this is all about ideology, it's all about agenda. And I think we have to face the facts, because we are playing for very high stakes right now. We are playing for the freedom of the United States. That's the stake. That's what we're risking, Father.
Great challenge, and you know, again, we continue to hear the Secretary just yesterday before the House talking about how in some way insurance companies should be happy to pay for this, because after all, what's going to happen is a reduction in the number of births.
Well, why don't you read the headline? Because I think it's a chilling headline.
Right.
Here, this reveals it perfectly.
It says,
in their own words.
yes,
In their own words.
This is Secretary Sebelius. Decrease in human beings will cover costs of contraception mandate. In other words, the reduction in the number of pregnancies compensates for the cost of contraception. One of the representatives, you know, questioned her, almost shaking his head. You know, I can't believe that this is true. He said this, is Representative Murphy says, so you are saying by not having babies born, we are going to save money on health care? Secretary Sebelius replied, providing contraception is a critical preventive health benefit for women and for their children.
It's very healthy to put yourself at risk for cancer, isn't it? This is what irritates me. Friends, we want you to call us 1-800-221-9460. Again, that's 800-221-9460 or 205-271-2980. Again, 205-271-2980. You know, Michael, to me, it's like the emperor that's running around with no clothes on, but nobody wants to tell him, you know, and the handwriting is on the wall. CEO of EWTN and Citizen, what do you think?
Well, I think that this administration has been very, very good at obfuscating the truth. You know, and I think what you've been saying here, I think, is absolutely right. There is a broader agenda. There is a much broader agenda here, and people need to realize that, and they also need to realize what side of the line they're on. You know, I think we're certainly in a day when Catholics have to be Catholics.
That's right.
When Catholic identity is important, and you can't be a half-hearted Catholic. And I think that's part of our problem here as well, among our elected representatives. As you mentioned, how many self-identified Catholic members of the Senate, you know, voted yesterday against the Blunt Amendment. How many of the officials involved in this identify themselves as being Catholic. Secretary Sebelius identifies herself as being Catholic. That's very, very troubling, and people have to understand, you know, that when you're Catholic, you need to be Catholic, and you need to uphold the principles of the Church, and you can't isolate that, as we said, to just the pew on Sunday. You have to bring that out into the public square on a daily basis.
Well, the Church exists to evangelize. You know, that is her mission. We have to be evangelized ourselves before we can carry it out there, and that's exactly what you're exhorting us to do. Friends, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we do want to hear from you. 1-800-221-9460. That's 205-271-2980 if you're in the Birmingham area. The 800 number again, 800-221-9460. We're visiting here today in a live presentation of Women of Grace with President and CEO of EWTN, Michael Warsaw, Catholic journalist and commentator Mary Jo Anderson, and our own Father Edmund Sylvia. He's our theological advisor, and he is our chaplain, Holy Cross Father. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guest today. We have President and CEO Michael Warsaw of EWTN with us here. Mary Jo Anderson, Catholic journalist and commentator. Father Edmund Sylvia, our theological advisor and chaplain to Women of Grace, a Holy Cross Father. We're inviting you to give us a call. I'm going to give you those numbers in just a minute. But I do want you to get out to our website, www.womenofgrace.com. And when you get out there, we certainly do want to invite you to check out WOG Exclusive. We have all kinds of information available to you, really resources that help you live the Catholic faith and share it with others. Educational, to help us know what the Church teaches and why she teaches what she teaches. All available for you there by subscribership at WOG Exclusive. You know, as we went to our break there, you had ended us on a very important note there, Michael, and we're talking about the need for us to be vigilant at this moment in history, that we can't just step to the side and say, well, it's so-and-so's job. No, this is for all of us, and we have to understand what the Church teaches and why she teaches it, and be good Catholics. Not a cafeteria Catholic. There's no time for that anymore, Father Ed.
No, really, and we've been challenged by this time and again. Pope Benedict has never moved off that point, you know, in some of his instructions of late. Think of how all of this coincides with the ad limina visits of American bishops. He's taken that opportunity to remind them of where our rights, you know, are really rooted. Number one, our rights don't come by any government. They come first and foremost from Almighty God. But the government of the United States understood and recognized the God, the creator of the natural law, etc., and enshrine that in our documents. But for us, we've got to recognize that whenever we are challenged, we're going to stand strong because, again, these are things that God has imparted to us and will encourage us to stand strong even in the face of persecution. Just yesterday, Cardinal Dolan did an update, which I would encourage people to go to the internet and read, because he wants to continue not only to inform, of course, the members of his own Archdiocese of New York, but speaking as the head of the NCCB, all Americans, to recognize that in the midst of all of this, while we don't see any immediate success here, what he said is necessary as we go on is we've got to be realistic and prepared for tough times.
I thought he was saying an awful lot in that phrase.
Oh,
Be
yes.
prepared for tough times.
And no question about it, like
There's
I said.
a subtext.
Yes.
And interestingly, I think in the last few years of his pontificate, Pope John Paul II constantly reminded us that Catholics have to be prepared for martyrdom. And sometimes we think of martyrdom as only being, quote, red or requiring our blood. But I don't know if you're familiar with the work and the writings of Father John Hardin. And one of his wonderful insights was a bloodless or a white martyrdom where you could have your business taken from you. You could be fined. Catholics could be pushed to the margins of society simply because they refuse to give in. But I really see it, Johnette. You know, we speak in Women of Grace so often of what is this grace for? It's not just to take home and use at home. This is grace that God pours into his, you know, his receptive people in order that it can be efficacious in the world.
Right.
And so this is the silver lining that I'm seeing in this assault on our rights, is that it, as you say, you have to know where you stand on this. And I think what will happen is Catholics will return to their faith. I had a discussion with someone on a radio program. Well, 58% of women are contracepting, and therefore the president feels that they are sort of on his team.
And are you talking about Catholic women?
Catholic women. So therefore, within any given Catholic institution, business, charity, 58% of the women are already contracepting. You're just serving the women who are already doing this. But the response was, but if 58% of Catholics are cheating on their income tax, should the church say that's okay now? So it's women who may be contracepting are not ready to say the church should teach it's okay. They know they're living against the grain. So now people will be forced to choose to be, as you say, visibly and determinedly Catholic and proud of it. That may be our silver lining.
1-800-221-9460, 1-800-221-9460. That's the way that you can join us here in our discussion. Michael, you know, the thing that I think is quite irksome is the fact that there is this insinuation, if you will, by the federal government that EWTN, any other organization or entity out there who calls itself Catholic, subscribes to the teachings of the Church, any citizen out there who is Catholic, ought to really bow in favor of what is the general wisdom or the conventional wisdom of the world, as opposed to holding by principles. And so if we ascribe to that as a people, or an individual, then what it really means is we're not principled. What it really means is we have no principles. What it means is we're shallow people, people of little character and no integrity. That whatever is the way to go at this moment, we go. We're just kind of like that reed, you know, that's blowing in the wind. You have no choice but to stand by what the Church teaches because it is truth.
Right, exactly, exactly. No, I think in some of this discussion, you know, you get the sense that some of the folks involved in this think that the Church defines doctrine by, you know, opinion polls and focus groups. You know, this is not a political discussion where, you know, we're going to go out to Gallup and say, well, what do they really think? And that's how we're going to define what the Church teaches. There's a huge disconnect there.
That's
you know,
right.
And you know, we've talked a lot about that ideology that's out there, and people have to understand, you know, this is all motivated by ideology. This is all motivated by agendas. You know, I think it's clear that this, in a way, is a first step towards an expansion of abortion mandates in healthcare plans. I certainly would look down the road and say if the administration is successful on this front, you know, that's probably someplace where they're going to go. Even in terms of language, you know, I think it's very important for people to stay very focused on what language is being used. I think when we announced the lawsuit, one of the, I took great delight in this in some levels, but Secretary Sebelius's spokeswoman, you know, denounced me on MSNBC saying, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, this doesn't provide any coverage for abortion. This is just contraception. You know, the plan, the rules require the provision of Plan B and Ella as part of this, both of which are abortion-inducing drugs. You know, people on that other side of the line don't want to go there. It's much easier to say, well, you know, 98% of women are contracepting, and this is just contraception. When you start talking about abortion, people naturally pull back from that. And so that's, I think, another example of where the administration, through this rule and through its language about this rule, has really tried to, you know, hide that and put that to the side and really not be truthful about what is at stake and what their ultimate agenda is here.
Well, when they're talking about contraception and Plan B, of course, Plan B is the morning after pill, which is an abortifacient. But the birth control pill itself is an abortifacient. The way in which that works, you know, early on, the hormone levels were so high that women were having heart attacks and blood clots, and they were stroking out. And so they had to reduce that. And the way that they did that is they created a hostile environment within the womb by using the hormones, so that the egg that is now fertilized, a little person cannot implant in the endometrial lining of the womb. And so as a result of that, it's sloughed off. So it works by an abortifacient mechanism, really, that's intrinsic to it. So this is what I mean. It's this constant spin. It's a shell game. You know, you just keep moving it, and the sleight of hand is so quick with words that you're not really sure where you ended up. And the sad thing is, it seems to me that it's been if you will, the mechanism of the administration to just keep saying the same thing over and over again, whether it's true or false. It really doesn't matter, because if you repeat it often enough, people are going to begin to believe it. And we've had that not just from the administration, but we've also had it from, you know, unfortunately, many medical personnel too, who will not reveal the truth about any of these things. We have Donna on the line. She's calling us from Oregon. Friends, you can call us too at 1-800-221-9460. Good morning, Donna. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. Good morning, Jeanette.
Good morning.
I was listening to your program, and when the priest was reading about the article about what Sebelius said, the question that popped into my mind was, is our government under Obama administration eventually going to force all women of childbearing age to take these birth control pills?
Well, any one of you have the answer for Donna?
they haven't said so much that, but there's no question that they see the managing of women's fertility as an important issue for them, and that in that managing, and this certainly relates to what Michael was saying about the whole issue of abortion. You know, this really does have that control of population as a concern.
Because it's going to save money.
Yes, and to think that it's justifiable because it's actually going to save us all money by having less persons born. Think of how much it costs, you know, for birth, et cetera. It's so ridiculous, but.
Yeah, no, I think recently I saw a commentator who made the comment that likened this to the U.S. government's first step toward a one-child policy, like China. You know, so I think obviously who knows where and what the government's ultimate intentions are. We didn't think 5 years ago we'd be having this conversation today. One never knows where this is headed. I think we have real reason to be concerned about where we're headed, and I think as I say, pundits who have likened it to the U.S.'s first steps towards that one-child policy, I think they're probably fairly accurate in that assessment.
Yeah, I think that and in addition to that, Michael, I also think that we are beginning to watch the de-evolution, if you will, of the governmental system that we have held so close to our hearts for 200 years. I think that we're beginning to see a very real shift towards a very socialistic state at the least, and potentially a totalitarian state at the worst. Father, you want to say something?
We're just talking about how up to this point, families were given a tax allowance for the number of children that they have. Are we coming to the point where families are going to be penalized?
Taxed for.
Right,
rather
for
than
the children that they have.
Or even one commentator I saw on the child issue said, well, what happens if the HHS promulgates a new rule that plans will pay for your first child, but any subsequent child, there's a discount rate as to what insurance benefits will be for that. So have a second child, you're on your own, there's no benefit.
Once the horse is out of the barn, the horse is out of the barn.
Exactly.
And, Donna, one thing that occurs to me as well, in terms of proactive, could they put a woman on some sort of birth control? Yes, because under the health care mandate, the idea is we're all responsible. Since we're insuring one another, your health problem becomes my health problem because my dollars are paying for it. Suppose you know that in your family you have a genetic risk. They might conceivably say, I'm sorry, but a child with this genetic propensity is too great a tax on the burden we have for insuring everyone. Therefore, we have to make sure only the healthiest children are born. You can see how quickly we could find ourselves swirling in a vortex of a nightmare under health. We are now going to determine we're going to play God. Who can live, who can be born.
Another expression of eugenics.
Exactly.
Really.
But with much more media savvy language.
Well, and a little bit more finesse, and yes, exactly right. And the reality is too, let's think about it this way with regard to contraception. We're putting our little girls on contraception. We're putting little girls on very strong pills that affect the way in which their bodies are maturing and developing at the age of 13. The longer a woman is on the birth control pill, the more difficult it is to conceive. So the reality, I mean, you can actually, in a certain sense, sterilize yourself by a continuous use of the birth control pill. So if it becomes such that this health insurance plan begins to, or the government says that we've got to begin to use birth control pills for our daughters at a certain age, and certainly there's been major pushes in that direction, at least in the media across the board, to use birth control pills to reduce acne. Well, who typically gets acne? But girls that are at their maturation point, right? So then you also fulfill this population control agenda, which I think is so much a part. We have Eileen calling us from Connecticut. You can call us at 1-800-221-9460. Good morning, Eileen.
Good morning. I just read an article today in the paper, and I verified it on the website, that in the medical journal that was, I guess, looked at from some people at Oxford University, they are making the case for after-birth abortion.
Yes.
In other words, it's when the babies are born, they will decide whether the child should live or die, whether or not they are disabled or not. And they're saying that newborns are potential persons, and a potential person is neither a person in the sense of subject of a moral right to life. Right now, I am just so upset over reading this.
It is upsetting, Eileen, and it's chilling. There's a name that comes into my mind as I hear you speak, and it's Peter Singer. And you know, actually, President Obama has made statements suggesting that, you know, if a child was supposed to be aborted and something goes wrong and the child is born, that the child should be left to die because the child was meant to be aborted.
The intent was.
So, and this is infanticide. Am I wrong? Is this infanticide?
Absolutely.
Eileen, I believe you can find that position paper online. It's the European Journal of Medical Ethics. How's that for irony? Medical Ethics, proposing that children not be considered born until they have a sort of a clean bill of health, that is in fact a more ethical way to go. I'm reminded, in addition to Peter Singer, of course, is that the Nobel laureates for discovering the DNA chain, one of them, Walter Crick, also holds Peter Singer's, or maybe Peter Singer learned from him, because Crick said a child should probably not be given a birth certificate till 3 or 4 years old, because some genetic anomalies do not show up until you're 3 or 4 years old. So the early rhetoric is in place to gradually move the public toward an idea that only the fittest shall survive. And we know where that leads.
The dehumanizing of the vulnerable.
That's right. Yeah, we're thinking of Dr. William Brennan and his work, dehumanizing the vulnerable. You know, we mentioned Peter Singer, and it's a good idea to give people an idea of who Peter Singer is. So, Mary Jo, do you want to tell them who Peter Singer is?
He is a professor of ethics at Princeton University.
Right. And he's
came to us, I think, from Australia.
Right. And for years now, he's been advocating these kinds of thoughts and ideas. Let's go to Joseph from Minnesota. 800-221-9460 is the number. Hey, Joseph, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing pretty good, Joanne. Little nervous over all this going on.
You ought to be. That's a good response, Joseph. Did you have a question for us?
Yeah, be not afraid, of course. But I have a question about. I'm not insured by a religious organization. I don't work for a religious organization. I was wondering, after the shepherd gets out of high water, what is he going to do for the sheep? I respect the bishops, of course, and everything they do, God send. But what are they going to do after they defeat this HHS mandate?
Good question. Michael.
No, I think I've talked to a lot of heads of secular company, for-profit companies, and I think there is a lot of concern out there. As one Catholic CEO said to me, well, my concern is that, you know, the bishops are going to win the fight, they're going to declare victory, and they're going to go home, and all of us guys who and women who you know run private companies are still left holding the bag because and that's a I don't think the bishops, based on anything they've said, particularly through the Religious Liberty Group and Bishop Laurie, I think they get that. I think they understand the position that private business owners are in very, very much. But you know, it is true. While there's all of this conversation, and while religious institutions have certainly a very strong argument here, you know, there's not been a lot of conversation about the fact that the Health Care Act requires that these services be covered in all health care plans. So if you're a for-profit secular employer, this is a problem for you as well. And I'm told, I don't know whether it'll come about, but I'm told that there are different efforts around the country right now by some private for-profit employers to file suit as well over this, which would bring a different voice to at least to the judicial forum. So we'll see.
You know, I'm thinking of the fact that we've watched, I think, in many months now, the way in which we have, I think, seen a deliberate attempt to marginalize the church in all ways. And I think it's important for our viewers to realize that the Catholic Church is one of the largest, perhaps the largest social service agencies in the world. I picked up a piece somewhere where it stated that, you know, what does the Catholic Church do for people anyway? And I just thought, now this is the most ignorant person, and I mean ignorant in terms of the fact that they're so uninformed, and to put something in ink that way, it just shows that they really have not done any homework whatsoever. And we've watched this happen through Catholic Charities, only on a slightly different issue, but related to the same thing, which is an attempt to take the teachings of the church or the teachings of most mainline churches and ratchet them over so far to the side that they're meaningless. Let's talk a little bit about what's happened with Catholic Charities and some of the others with regard to an attempt to close the doors.
Sure.
Well, just recently in the Diocese of Springfield in Illinois, the bishop has said they would have to close their adoption agencies because, of course, they will not place adoptive babies and children with homosexual pairs. And this is the mandate of the state. So they have now come to the end of their legal options, according to the bishop, and they will simply be forced to shut that down. This is a terrible loss to the people of Illinois, and if that should begin to cascade through other states, we'll have a tremendous loss. We saw this in Boston, of course. The same thing happened in Massachusetts, where the church just had to say, I'm sorry, but we cannot comply. This is against our religious liberty, our teachings, even our rights of conscience. Even if we're not practicing Catholics, we still would not go that far. I think that's an interesting point, too, that many observers of the Catholic population assume that a Catholic that's not living 100% faithfully by 100% of the teachings is therefore open to being on the other side, being against the church. And I don't believe that's true. I think that we'll find that's interesting. But I think many other like Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services and...
Well, Cardinal George this past week published a very, very good column, and it's available at National Catholic Register, the ncregister.com site. And he made an interesting point there about the ultimate effects of this mandate 2 to 3 years down the road, and he sort of used a kind of an interesting analogy. He said, if you haven't bought a directory of the Archdiocese of Chicago yet, go out and buy one today, because 2 years from now that will be a great souvenir for you, because when you turn 2 years from now to the page where all of the healthcare facilities and all of the clinics and all of the social services agencies that the Archdiocese provides, you'll see those pages will be blank, because this mandate and these other actions by the government are forcing the church from providing these services that it has done for hundreds of years in this country, and that's tragic.
What
if
a
that
big
happens.
visual that is.
It is. Yeah.
You know, as you're sharing with us, Michael, I'm very aware of the fact that EWTN is not standing alone in lawsuits against the federal government. You're joined by other organizations, as well as some attorney generals from states around the United States. And I think it's very important to make the message known and to take a stand. Absolutely. No, I think this is the first time in 30 years that EWTN has ever filed a lawsuit in a federal court, and there's a reason for that. You know, this is an unprecedented intrusion upon EWTN and all people of faith. You know, Mother Angelica did not found EWTN to be a weak voice. No. She founded EWTN to be a strong voice for the teachings of the church, and this was clearly a time when we could not sit on the sidelines, and we had to step up, along with some other great organizations like Belmont Abbey College, Ave Maria University, Christian College of Denver, Colorado, several others, the attorneys general, many of the institutions in the Diocese of Lincoln. You know, there's a movement there, and we're all moving together, because I think we all realize this is unprecedented, and it's critical for us to step up now. Yeah. You know, as we come to the close of the program here, I think that the step that EWTN has taken is a step for all of us to emulate in whatever way we can. You know, we've got this tremendous group of individuals, organizations that are out there doing a hard piece of the work for us, and that is you're taking on the lawsuit. But that doesn't give any of us a pass. We have all got to do what we possibly can to preserve and protect all that is God-honoring in our culture, you know, and to reclaim all that's been lost. And it's always harder to reclaim than it is to preserve and protect from the front end. You know, it's very hard to rebuild a nation. It's very hard to rebuild a principled nation. It's very hard to put back in place rights once they've been taken from us. And we cannot look at this lightly. So just a couple of suggestions as we come to the close of the program. What can we as individuals sitting in our homes today do to get behind EWTN, to get behind these efforts, and also to let our voice be heard?
Sure. Well, I'd say first and foremost, pray and fast. Pray and fast for the success of our lawsuit and all of these challenges. Pray and fast for the overturning of this mandate and for a change of hearts on this, I think, is first and foremost. Secondly, you know, is to continue to support financially the work of EWTN.
That's right.
Because I think now more than ever, we and our partners in this great apostolate have to be sure that our voice can continue to be heard in the public square.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being with us today. And friends, I want to thank you too. We do encourage you to get out to www.ewtn.com and www.womenofgrace.com as well. We've been talking about a very serious issue here. I think that Michael has given us a good way that we can all get engaged. That's to pray and fast. You know what it says in sacred scripture, only some can be loosed by prayer and fasting. And we certainly have got to do our part. Until we are together again, may the abundant life of Jesus Christ be yours, and may God richly bless you. Bye-bye now.